David, I have been spending some time talking about this announcement by Christian Dubé, medical students graduating, forcing them to stay. Opinion's been kind of mixed, and I heard on our news, opposition parties have come out, say, supporting it, but, it's a big but, saying this is more proof, of course, that the system is broken to begin with. So what do you make of all this?
Well, I think the opposition parties and everybody looking at this in general have to yet again come to the conclusion that Christian Dubé, remember, before the 2022 election, right, he said, we have to overhaul the system. He used the expression refoundation. We have to start all over again. And here we are now in the third year of this experiment. And a few weeks ago, what were we talking about? Remember, we were talking about family doctors and the triage now that Christian Dubé was proposing, that we're going to go by a need basis to be able to access a family doctor. And now this is just another example of how fragile our system is. Over 22,000 doctors in Quebec, Aaron, and we have 775 of them who have disaffiliated themselves from the public system. That means that they do not charge the government for their services. They are out. And it's basically now we're at the pace of 50 a year. That's basically, 3% of all doctors in Quebec. But the system is so fragile right now that Christian Dubé is going to have to introduce a bill to create this system where, we're not going to take this anymore about subsidizing, paying between $400,000 to $800,000 to fund what it takes to train a doctor in Quebec, for this doctor then to go into the private system. This was sort of the social contract before. And so the objective here is to say, if you're going to pay a few $1,000s a year for your tuition, it takes 10 years basically to train a doctor. If you're going to pay just a fraction, and you're not going to work in the public system, well, then there's going to be some consequences. We'll see what they are in the bill, but it shows how fragile it is. Now, there are other aspects, and you've alluded to them as well. I mean, there are operating rooms that are idle, and they've been idle for years because not only because we don't have enough doctors, because we don't have enough nurses, support staff, and it goes far beyond. But the thing is that we are at the very beginning of this tsunami that is going to take over the healthcare system in Quebec because of the population getting older, because we don't have enough staff. I mean, the Vaudreuil Super Hospital, it's going to open less than 2 years from now, Aaron. 4,800 positions, and the healthcare ministry has no clue how they're going to get filled. So Christian Dubé needs to try things, and we're going to have to try different things to keep doctors in the public system. And I think the government actually is not going far enough with this. I would go full on like in the U.S. for the Army, the ROTC program, where, the government will pay your entire tuition, but in exchange, you're guaranteeing us that you're going to give us 5, 7, 10 years in the system. And we're going to have to look at that for nurses as well. We're going to have to find ways to have more professionals because the population is getting to a place right now where the fact that we're getting older, the pressure on the system is going to be so we can't even address the need right now, and it's going to multiply exponentially 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So we actually have to be much more aggressive in the way we're going to retain doctors and healthcare professionals in the system. So good on Dubé for trying something here, but maybe he's not going enough. And a lot of opposition, all the opposition parties in one way or another are saying, yeah, you have to go even further along this track.
I would maybe JV, you don't know. So this idea of it's costing Quebec taxpayers, because this is the number that Dubé cited, 470,000 to a little over 700,000 to put these people through school. Is that from bursaries, loans, and grants?
No.
What does that represent?
No, this is the entire cost to train a doctor in Quebec. To go to university, you're paying per semester, you're paying a few thousand a year. Per semester. So $2,000-$3,000 per semester when you're a student. And so you can get bursaries and student loans for that little part. But the overall, the fact is that to train nurses and doctors, it is almost entirely, you're talking about 60, 70, 80% of it is funded by our tax dollars. And so this was always the sort of the deal. University tuition is incredibly low in Quebec. It's always been like that for Quebecers. Foreign students, it's a different thing. But for Quebecers, tuition has always been incredibly low. And it was sort of the idea on the healthcare side, well, in exchange for that, you're gonna serve in the public system. But now the system is so fragile. Well, now we're just losing 775 doctors so far to the private sector is making a huge difference. It's adding to the wait times in a huge way. It's not the only cause, but that's how the numbers bear out. So at some point, we have to change these ways of doing things that are 10, 20, 30 years old.
So I wonder, too, if the case is we're not sure that even doing something like this, as good as it may be, is going to change the situation. What about the recognition of doctors who are in other jurisdictions who come here and aren't even allowed to practice here? Wouldn't the government consider doing something about that?
Well, that's the college. That's up to the College of Physicians. The college. There's also the fact that if we're talking about recognizing doctors that have been trained elsewhere than in Quebec, that's a completely different debate, because the College of Physicians, and it's not the only profession. I mean, we've seen it with lawyers, we've seen it with engineers, we've seen it with a lot of professions. There's sort of because there is an angle, okay, we have to protect the public, we have to make sure these people have been properly trained and are equal or superior to the standards that we have here. That's one thing, but it doesn't take years to check. But sometimes there's a lot of obstacles to that, Aaron, because and I've seen it, I saw it when I was immigration minister, because we were going through the same thing back in 2018, is the fact that a lot of these professional corporations like to limit the entry into the profession, because if you have less members in a profession, that means you make more money. And that's the ugly truth about this as well. So there are a lot of professional corporations that like the idea of rarefying access to the profession, because that makes their professions much more valuable when it comes time for salaries.
I'm not sure how we ever get out of this, one way or the other. There's not even a plan. I mean, outside of, Santé Quebec, whatever that means, and the new head of Santé, what does that change?
Yeah. Well, it will probably not change much. I mean, Santé Quebec, there's certain interesting things in the bill with regards to how an agency that is not as constrained by government structures will maybe have more flexibility in getting some changes done. But at the end of the day, Aaron, we are heading into a massive wall, and unions, doctors associations, the two big federations of doctors, the system is completely broken. But until we have a government that is basically up against it in such a way that there's no other choice, we're going to keep on limping on the way we are. And but right now, like I said, take again the most concrete example that I have. Follow this: the Vaudreuil Super Hospital, 4,800 healthcare positions. The only way right now the healthcare ministry is going to be able to fill those positions is by actually cannibalizing other hospitals in the greater Montreal region.
All right, listen, it wouldn't be complete. We're a day away, and I'm not going to have you on until this happens. So we are now looking, I think, pretty much, and we have been for a while, at a dead-even race, depending on who you believe today. I don't know, maybe Kamala Harris is winning Iowa. That's the latest. Nate Silver may be turning over his prediction to give it to Kamala Harris. What do you see happening tomorrow? What's your take on this?
Well, my take on this, a lot has been said over the weekend about this Iowa poll. And the source is very solid. But again, it's not about necessarily Kamala Harris winning Iowa as much as what seems to be happening over the last week. Two things. That comedian that made those comments about Puerto Rico, there are 400,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, which is one of the key states of the Blue Wall. And the Latino vote is going to play a major role. So there definitely seems to be a shift right there on that very comment and the consequences, and actually Donald Trump not, again, as usual, not walking it back. The other piece is white women in the Midwest who, for the past two presidential elections, have been voting for Donald Trump in a big way. And so the Trump comment on saying, I'm going to be good for women whether they like it or not, and abortion, there's definitely something, and that's what the Iowa poll seems to be saying, but it's not the first time we're seeing this. White women, educated and non-educated white women in the Midwest, we've seen it actually in past elections on ballot initiatives on abortion in Missouri and in Kansas, traditional red states. We've seen it also in gubernatorial races in places like Kentucky, another red state, where white women have basically stopped voting Republican. Not all of them, obviously, but there's definitely a shift. And when you're looking at this poll in Iowa, well, Iowa is next door to Wisconsin. That's part of the Blue Wall. It's going to have an impact also in Michigan. It's going to have an impact in also suburban areas of Pennsylvania, where those counties are going to be key. Same thing in North Carolina, where, again, these are traditionally Republican states that where women have been traditionally voting Republican, and that's the shift that we're seeing over the past few days and maybe, dare I say, weeks. And so I'm going to be following this very closely, because even, for example, we're going to get early results in Florida. If Florida is tighter, it's not going to go Democrat. But let's say it's tighter than it usually is, just like we saw in 2016, where we got the sense that Hillary Clinton was in trouble after the Eastern Seaboard states came in.
Right.
And so it's going to be, I think, the same thing. When you see North Carolina coming in, when you see some of these Midwestern states, if they're closer than usual coming in for the Republicans, that could be a very positive signal for the battleground states of the Blue Wall.
Last question. We have 30 seconds. What time does Donald Trump claim he won?
Oh, my goodness. He's going to claim it's rigged. I think it's going to be around because Georgia results come in early. So I think you could have it as soon as 7:30, 8 o'clock Eastern. And then that's going to be the real battle, right? Because as we know, there's a big strategy in place from the MAGA movement to block certification of results in certain states and to try to throw it to the House of Representatives. And so that's going to be the key here. Will democracy hold in those states?
Oh, my. All right. That is tomorrow. By the way, coverage here begins at 7 o'clock. David, thank you.